what we found early on is what we do is very specialized, and it's technical. And so there's not going to be many people who are trained in Amazon advertising in Duluth, Minnesota. And so to help bring that together, we found that we needed to really drive a learning culture where we could hire for culture first and then really teach those technical aspects that go along with the job. And so from our hiring process all the way through the onboarding process and then the continuous improvement process, we really have a learning culture where, from the technical side, we view those all as skills that can be taught. But from the culture standpoint, it's much harder to teach. And so by being able to hire locally and focusing on being able to train in on the technical side, we can really focus on those cultural aspects that drive the focus on the client, just the way that we can communicate and tell a story with data.
Welcome to Grow Think Tank. This is the one and only place where you will get insight from the founders and the CEOs of the fastest growing privately held companies. I am the host. My name is Gene Hammett. I help leaders and their teams navigate the defining moments of their growth. Are you ready to grow?
Today we look at creating a solid office culture. In the light of COVID, a lot of people have gone to hybrid or remote cultures, and I get it. Our company is completely remote, but there are still some companies that feel like the collaboration is necessary and the level of trust to have an in-office culture. So we've got a special episode to you today about how to create a solid office culture. Our interview is with Joe Shelerud. He is the CEO, co-founder of Advance, and they were number 500 on the Inc. list. I had to look down at my notes to make sure I get everything right. They have a small team, but it's really focused on having an incredible culture. We walk through some of the things that they do. You might guess that it starts with hiring. You got to have the right people into this, but you also have to create a learning culture. They're not hiring people just based on skill fit. They live in a small town where not everyone has the skills that they need. So they've created ways to develop those skills inside of the right people that are a culture fit. I don't want to give away too much, but that is a really important piece to the growth of their company and scalability of their company. The other things we look at is, the leadership principles that really guide them, and some of the things that they do, they're fairly interesting. When they talk about how they arrange their desk every month, you might be surprised about what he says they do to do that, because position and authority are not the most important thing. It really is about the people. And we also look at some of the other elements that has gotten in the way of their culture, as he really talks about the ways that they are transparent with each other and how they truly grow and give feedback to each other. So all of this is unpacked in today's episode. My hope is with episodes like this that you are becoming a better leader. Now, if you want to fast track that, you don't have to wait and listen to, a dozen episodes and try to, make sense of it. The quickest way I know for you to become a better leader is for you to have a conversation with me so that we can sit down and talk about the things that are getting in the way of what you really want to create. Now, you have to take ownership that it is you. You are the problem. You can't blame others. You as a CEO are the person who can fix these things. And that's a real opportunity. If you are the problem, you are the solution. Now, if you believe this, then let's have a conversation about who you are and how your being is getting in the way of you leading this company. They deserve more from you. They are really excited about these opportunities to grow. And are you giving them the chance to grow? If you want to take me up on that offer, just go to genehammett.com, schedule your call. Inside that conversation, we will unpack this. I've done this for a decade now, how you can be a more powerful leader, how you can really move beyond transactional leadership and strategic leadership to exceptional leadership. And I want to help you do that. All you have to do is go to genehammett.com and schedule your call. Now, here's the interview with Joe. Joe, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Gene?
I'm great. We're going to have a great conversation about your culture of your company, how that drives growth. But before we get there, I'd love you to tell us about the company, Advance.
Yeah. So Advance got started kind of in a weird way as I was expanding to my different businesses. So I'm actually a chemical engineer by background, and as I was trying different businesses, I started selling these organic chemistry molecular model kits on Amazon. And as I was growing that brand, started to advertise on Amazon. And just being an engineer myself, started to build out some different tools for my advertising, and then realized working with different sellers that I could probably help them too with their advertising. Since then, we've expanded quite a bit. We have our own internal software that we use to optimize advertisements for many clients throughout the world, and really focus on digital advertising, specifically on Amazon, to help sellers and brands really grow.
I think everyone knows that when they order something from Amazon, that some products are actually in their warehouses and some products get shipped by Amazon resellers or and whatnot, and you help them be found. But I'm kind of curious, given the insight that you have and watching across data, what is the future of buying off Amazon? Do you have any idea?
Yeah, I think that was one eye-opening thing for me really early on, is that a lot of the products that you buy are actually from smaller sellers, like myself when I got started. So it's about 50% of products that you can buy on Amazon are actually through third-party sellers, which are a lot of small businesses. And so as we go forward, there's a huge opportunity for brands to really grow on the platform. Amazon's opened up a lot of different options for us and what it takes to really start a brand and to grow that. And so a lot of great opportunity, but with that, there's a ton of competition out there on the Amazon platform too. So people like us, we can help get your products promoted and get more views and eyeballs to really establish that growth as you go.
Well, it makes me think, I know we're coming into the Christmas season here. I like to support smaller businesses. You just don't know exactly if you're buying on Amazon, whether you're supporting the big business, which I own stock too. So I believe in them, but also it makes me feel good to support some of the smaller businesses. I am still using other platforms to, when I can. I really appreciate you being here talking about this. Your company has grown really fast. Number 500 on the Inc. 5000 this past year. This is your first time on the list. What were you most excited about when you made that list?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really cool just starting a business from nothing and seeing it grow to the point where it's getting recognized on some of these national lists. It was really cool. And like for our company, while we develop our own software and our own tech, it's very people focused and it's very people driven. And so I think it was really cool recognition for the team, especially for those who started really early on and with Ad Advanced, see it grow to the point where we could look on Inc. magazine and see ourselves listed along a lot of other awesome companies throughout the US.
It's really cool to know that you're very people focused, and I had a lot of people have been on the list this interviews before, and the list are people focused. But we came here to talk about your culture specifically. When you look to analyze the culture and you were like defining this, did you break it up into different segments that you could share with us today, or is it some other way you could define what you were really trying to create with your culture?
Sure. Well, one decision we made early on with our business is that we actually wanted to have an in-office culture, and we wanted to hire locally. And I know this really goes against the grain on where a lot of businesses are going right now. We're located in Duluth, Minnesota. So we're a small town in northern Minnesota in terms of relative metro areas. And so what we found early on is what we do is very specialized, and it's technical. And so there's not going to be many people who are trained in Amazon advertising in Duluth, Minnesota. And so to help bring that together, we found that we needed to really drive a learning culture where we could hire for culture first and then really teach those technical aspects that go along with the job. And so from our hiring process all the way through the onboarding process and then the continuous improvement process, we really have a learning culture where, from the technical side, we view those all as skills that can be taught. But from the culture standpoint, it's much harder to teach. And so by being able to hire locally and focusing on being able to train in on the technical side, we can really focus on those cultural aspects that drive the focus on the client, just the way that we can communicate and tell a story with data, all those key things we can hire for and then teach the specifics of the job after that.
Now, Joe just mentioned hiring for culture. You've probably heard this before, but one of the pieces behind that is your company core values. They must be very well defined. When they're defined, you can actually interview people based on how much of alignment they have around those values. I'm going to suggest that you not make the questions very direct because they will always give you the answer they think you want to hear. Figure out ways that are a little bit more indirect and getting to the answer. Do they fit your company core values? And then secondly, you've got to live your values. You've got to make sure that you're consistent with this. You're living the values over and over and over. You combine that with that learning culture that Joe talked about, you've got a very powerful force inside your company for growth and scalability. Back to Joe. A learning culture is something I think a lot of people would say that they have, but I think they probably do a pretty poor job at it. And I'm not saying you guys do a poor job at all, but what is it you've found is necessary when you have a culture of people who don't know the technical platforms you're using and even the technical languages that you're using and how to look at data the way you look at it? What have you guys learned about this learning culture?
Yeah. Especially in digital advertising, the space is constantly evolving and changing. So you can never sit still, because if you are, you're losing ground. And so, if I look at our team and those who have really prospered, it's those people who love to dig into issues or problems and really figure out how things work. And so it's finding those driven individuals who, while they may not have specific training in Amazon advertising, they can look at this and say, all right, I can peel back the different pieces and put this all together, and in a short period of time, be an expert in the area. And so I think it's really, for us, when we're going through the interview, it's finding that drive, finding those people who have those base set of skills, to be able to speak and talk to data and be able to put together, take some complex information and put it into a nice, simple story. But then it's always just that next step of wanting to learn how things work and then being able to translate that to other people and teach them too.
So we've talking about two different things, Joe, so far. We talked about, developing this in-office culture, but it's really defined by hiring for culture first and having this learning element inside the culture. What would we see, though, day to day with your business as far as culture?
Sure. Yeah. So one thing that was really interesting is, as we were going through the period with COVID and we had different lockdowns, we had periods where we were all working together in the office. And then we had periods where we all went remotely. And we had one point where I've got 3 young kids and we had some sick kids at home. And so I didn't want to come into the office to potentially get other people sick. My co-founder, Matt, he just had a newborn. And so he was working from home for a while. And what was really interesting is we left the option open to everybody if they wanted to go into the office or not. And everybody else was coming in. And it was pretty cool, because I always wonder as a manager, like, am I forcing this upon people? And I see articles many times of like managers who are forcing the come back to the office culture where a lot of people don't want to do it. And I think a key thing is just the collaboration and the community aspect of being in person with other people. You get to hear so many different ways that our account managers get to explain different topics to clients or work with different people and being able to solve a problem. And so I think that community culture that we've established, where we're able to support each other and kind of build each other up, it's really been core to what we do when we're dealing with many different issues or opportunities. How do you utilize those? How do you best communicate those to the client? And then how do you put those into practice?
Well, we've been talking about an in-office culture and really how to create a solid culture. How do you lead a solid culture? Because it's a little bit different than just having people get work done. When you think about culture and you have this people focus to it, how would you describe your leadership principles?
Yeah. I mean, so one core principle that we have is transparency. And so we always try to be really open from the top down. And I think one key piece from a leadership perspective is, how do we take feedback and how transparent can we show that others are being with us? And so being able to drive direct feedback from the team up to management, I feel like is critical. We've recently gone through and we've done a DISC assessment, which just kind of talks through, key areas in our personalities that we tend to lean towards. And each person is going through their DISC profile and kind of opening it up and sharing, all right, here's key pieces on kind of how I operate, what makes me tick. Here's some issues that can come out of that, or some perceptions or conflicts that I may have with other types of personalities. I went through and did mine and then left it open for feedback for everybody from the team. And it was really cool to see, one, that people felt comfortable being able to share feedback, both about the pros and the cons, or the opportunities that I have in my personality style. But two, then just being able to effectively talk through like all the ways that we can utilize these different personality traits to better communicate with each other and better support each other overall. So I think it's transparency, it's being open to that feedback, so you can really have that open culture that we're seeking.
Joe has been talking about transparency. I did some incredible research a couple of years ago, and it's really relevant today. And I asked a lot of the founders and CEOs in the Inc. 5000 that year, what was more important in their business. And they came back with a long list of things that were important for them, but there was nothing that was more important than transparency. It really was surprising to me that they didn't talk about their financials. They didn't talk about their marketing plan, their sales. They talked about the ability to give feedback to others and to accept feedback and the transparency that is necessary. Now, some people think that's financial transparency. It could be, but I really think beyond that. You want a remarkable transparency. I have written articles about this. I have talked about it with my clients. It really does make a difference. If you have transparency, people feel connected to the mission, to the work in a different way. It's more than just a job. Now back to Joe. Transparency has been a really common part of the cultures for a lot of the fast growth companies. And it really has been an important way to look at this, like being able to accept that feedback from others, I think is really evolved of you as a leader. Some of it's probably hard to take. Is there a time when you think about something that someone has said to you about your own, the way you show up as a leader, that was hard to take, but you really needed that dose of medicine?
Sure. I mean, I get feedback like that every day that just makes me stop and think. Like, for instance, I lead our marketing and our sales team, and I'm a very logically thinking person. I'm an engineer, and so you picture your typical engineer. I'm probably that stereotype, and so like in our sales and our marketing team, we have many more like free thinkers, creative thinkers, and so one thing that I have the tendency to do is, if an item gets brought up, I logically think through the execution and how it fits in and how we're going to prioritize it, without even letting that idea come all the way to fruition. And so we just had a conversation actually directly before we were recording this podcast, and it was brought up to me that, you have a huge skill set here and you help us prioritize it, but it can stifle our creative thinking that we have. And so I love that type of feedback, because it makes me just stop and think and analyze how any action that I have as a leader can be impacting the team. And I think the more aware we are of that, and the more open our team is to share that, the better we can really think through, okay, there's pros and cons to any approach you can take, but some responses may be better geared in different situations. And I have to be aware of those other second order consequences to how I approach problems, and how other people may approach them.
Really good points there. All this makes me think about the work I've done with others as an executive coach and working in leadership development. Transparency is one of those things that we talk about quite often because it is so important. And also another element like inclusion, and they're very much related, but I would imagine the collaboration you have is you don't want just your ideas to win, you want the best ideas to win.
For sure.
When you're looking at creating new ways of reaching, it's changing so fast in digital marketing. How are you ensuring that the best ideas win in your culture?
Sure. Yeah, that's another thing we've really tried to strive from day one. I've worked at some bureaucratic organizations, and that's one thing that I'm constantly scared of as we keep growing. And so I mean, we'll do little things like each month. We just completed this. Every month at the beginning of the month, we all draw for new desks in the office. So nobody has a set desk, nobody has a set office. And Matt and I, co-founders, like we're in the pool with everybody else. And so each month you draw a different desk and you move your stuff, you roll your chair over with your computer and everything else, and you go to the new spot. And, it's small, but a couple of reasons why I like this is one, you're constantly exposed to different people on the team. I found that before we did this, I would get really close with the people I sat close by and not as close with the other people. And then the other piece too is just to show like we have offices we could take, but I feel like that then is just a visual indication of bureaucracy or hierarchy that I don't want to have. And so we take small steps like that. And there's many other pieces that we do. But the key thing is, I think, indicating that, all right, status or position at the company doesn't matter. What truly matters is the best decisions, the best outcomes, the best ideas. And whoever they come from in whatever position really doesn't matter to me and shouldn't matter to anybody else.
That's a fantastic example. I was just biting at my tongue to try to be able to jump in here to say how much I love this idea. I've never heard it before. And that's one reason why I have these interviews, because we learn these ideas from companies that just maybe think differently and they think about people from a different perspective. Makes me curious, Joe, what else do you guys do that might be on the same par with this that others might not be doing or thinking about in order to create the kind of culture that you have?
Sure. I think another, and these are all minor things, but they add up. Like, so in Duluth, we're a couple hours away from Canada. You can probably hear with my quasi-Canadian accent, but it gets really cold in the winter. And so in Duluth, they've built this skywalk system where you can actually walk a couple miles from building to building. It's all connected and heated and everything. And then in the summer, we're in this awesome touristy destination. And so what we do for a lot of our one-on-one meetings is we actually go for a walk. And what we found is that when you're sitting in an office or at a table, especially for somebody like me, like you just think through like efficiency and I don't know, just your conversations stay a lot more like just professional. Whereas when you go out for a walk, it gives you so much more of an opportunity to really open up. And I think sometimes we forget that, a lot of things that happen outside of work can have a major impact to how we do in the workplace or how we're approaching different problems. And so, another thing that we do is when we have our one-on-ones, we always go for walks. And it just helps I found that having an hour walk, you have enough time where it's not rushed, you can get more personal, and it just doesn't feel, you feel much more open than sitting across a meeting room table with each other. So, another minor structural thing we do, but I feel like it's had pretty big implications overall in terms of getting new ideas, really connecting with the team members emotionally, or, just getting outside and getting some exercise too. So all those pieces go hand in hand.
I love this. I used to have clients that were local when I did executive coaching, and we would walk on this place in Atlanta called the Beltline, which is a great place to get out and exercise and walk your dogs and ride your bikes. And we would go out there and have coaching sessions. And I remember that made me think of just how real the conversations were away from technologies. We left our phone back in the office, and the clarity that he would leave those conversations. So I appreciate you bringing that back up, Joe. We've been talking about, creating a solid office culture and how that impacts growth. I really appreciate all of your wisdom and everything that you've shared today, Joe.
Yeah, thank you, Gene.
What a great interview. Here's some of the things I really enjoy talking about. Of course, hiring for a culture fit is something I believe. You want to make sure you are hiring people that are a fit first. You can teach certain skills, you can grow them over time, and they will appreciate you for that. But you want to make sure the culture fit is there. You also want to make sure that you are transparent. You are truly giving feedback and accepting feedback where necessary. The examples that Joe talked about in here, I think were really profound. Hopefully you learned from them about how his logic gets in the way of his actual creative decision-making that the team is surrounded by. And there's a lot more inside this episode, but I just wanted to make sure that you know that we're here to support you and your team. We do leadership development, we do executive coaching. If you feel like we can help you, make sure you go to genehammett.com and schedule a call to get to know each other. When you think of leadership and you think of growth think Think Tank. As always, lead with courage. We'll see you next time.